So as the Omicron surge wanes in our area, many COVID restrictions are finally being relaxed.
Elected officials say easing of mask mandates and in some cases vaccination requirements is part of the virus moving from a pandemic to an endemic stage. But some experts say with nearly 1 million Americans killed by COVID, we aren't there yet. Joining us right now, someone who's been at the helm of the nation's COVID response for 2 years, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Nice to have you back on Good Day New York.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
So, Dr. Fauci, as you know, COVID cases rapidly declining in our area. Is it time to get rid of masking for children in school?
Well, according to the current today CDC guidelines and recommendations, they're the guidelines that they use by coding the degree of infection. It's still a bit risky to do that. However, balanced by that, Rosanna, is that the cases are coming down very rapidly. And it very well may be that what we're going to see within a quite short, reasonable period of time, the CDC are going to be using different metrics to make their guidelines. So focusing less on the number of cases and more on a combination of the number of hospitalizations and the hospital capacity in a particular area. So though it's a little risky to be pulling back right now, I think at the end of the day, it may turn out to be okay, because there are a lot of regions like New York where it's coming down, things look much better, and people are just wanting to get back to their lives. But we got to be careful because we're not 100% there yet. We're not at that level that's so low that we can feel very comfortable. It's a bit of a risk, but very well may be okay.
So, Dr. Fauci, as you know, we've gotten mixed messages on masks from day one. You know, what evidence is there that children wearing masks are protecting others? And how do you weigh that against the mental health of these kids?
Yeah, no, Rosanna, you make a very good point, and that's the reason of all the tension and the stress of trying to balance protecting the children from getting infected themselves or passing it on to others versus the effects that you have on putting restrictions so that children don't have that normal type of a feeling in school. It's a very, very difficult problem, and it's a very, very delicate balance. One thing that I think people should appreciate, if you look at the data from the CDC that they've published, there's no doubt when they looked at schools that required masks compared to schools comparable in every other way that did not require masks, the level of infection among the unmasked group was clearly greater than in the masked group. So that's pretty good data that masking does offer a degree of protection, and sometimes a rather strong degree of protection, depending upon the quality of the masks.
And it's not just masks. I know we were talking about vaccines and boosters for that age group, ages 5 to 11. Only 20% of them are getting vaccinated, even though they're allowed to. Does that worry you about moving forward with this?
You know, it really does, as a matter of fact. It's really unfortunate. We have such a highly effective and very safe vaccine, safe for children and safe for adults. And we have the availability of those vaccines. To not utilize them is truly unfortunate. We only have about 65% of the entire population of the country vaccinated and about 70+% of the adults vaccinated. But we've got to do better with the children for whom vaccines are available, 5 and older. We're collecting data. Pfizer and the FDA are looking at data now for children that are 6 months to 5 years. If we can get that cohort, the below 5 and the above 5, vaccinated together with people getting their boosters, and I do want to bring that up. I mean, if you look at the data, particularly with Omicron, we're in an Omicron era now. Virtually everything out there is Omicron. And the protection against Omicron is definitely lower when you're dealing with a vaccine that, for example, would protect against Delta. But the one thing is very clear, that for those who've been vaccinated and who get boosted, the protection, at least against severe disease, which leads to hospitalization, goes way up, approaching 80%. And when you look at the hospitalizations and you look at the graphs, it's crystal clear The people who are hospitalized or who are dying overwhelmingly are represented by the unvaccinated compared to the vaccinated and people who are boosted who do even much better than that. So if you're not vaccinated, get vaccinated. And if you are vaccinated and your time comes, please get boosted. That's what's going to keep us down. We're at a lower level. We're coming down. Everybody feels good about that. I feel good about it in D.C. You guys feel good about it in New York. But we want to keep that level down. We don't want to see that rebound that we have seen so many times with different waves.
Well, can I ask about, because something that became crystal clear as well is the CDC's information on people that have already had COVID. Millions of people, especially with this wave of Omicron, even kids. Moving forward, don't you think that needs to be taken into account as well to maybe not have to get a booster?
Yeah, well, certainly, and there's a lot of lack of clarity, I would say, on this. If you get infected and you recover, there is no doubt that you have a considerable degree of protection. That protection wanes, just the way protection from vaccine wanes. But when you look at someone who's been infected, who then gets vaccinated, the level of protection in that person is extremely high. And that's the reason why we're saying, although you fully recognize that people who've been infected are protected, that if you really want to get a durable, high degree of protection, getting vaccinated also is very, very helpful to you.
So can we talk a little bit about the UK? Because Boris Johnson has said they're ending all COVID restrictions. Is that advisable?
Right now, I don't think that that's advisable given the status of infection there. Again, they're somewhat in the same situation where they have infections coming down. They have that same urge to want to get on with life, but you've got to be careful. If you pull back prematurely and you get a rebound, then you're right back where you were before. And one of the problems is going to be if you pull back and everybody gets used to not having any restrictions at all, and then the cases start to surge again, then you're going to have a lot of trouble getting people back to where they want to be to get the level down again. So better get it down, keep it down for a while, and then gradually get back. Everybody wants to get back to normal. I don't know of anybody, any health person, any public health official, myself, all of us here, we all want to get to the point where we can put the masks aside and we can get back to the normal life that we all crave. We want to make sure we do it prudently.
So let me just ask you, because D.C., I think the mayor there has lifted restrictions as well. You don't need a COVID card to get into a restaurant. You know,
Right.
Those of us in New York, you know, who have restaurants, we're now the COVID police. We have to tell people they can or can't come in our restaurant. It's kind of curious, though, in D.C. they've let down the restrictions where the politicians are.
I don't know if it has anything to do with the politicians. Mayor Bowser is a very good mayor. She makes decisions based on the data. She made a decision. It's a close call, you know, because it's a moving target, Rosanna, because at the time people are pulling back on restrictions, the cases keep coming down. So you may say, I'm going to pull back restrictions a week from now. By the time a week from now comes, you may be at the level that it's okay to pull back on it, at least, again, by the CDC guidelines. The one thing people need to understand that the CDC makes guidelines in a broad way. It's always up to the local officials to use those kinds of guidelines to make a determination based on the particular conditions, the particular status of the location for which you're responsible for. So people may get confused and say, well, the CDC says this and the other people are doing this. The discretion of what the decision is always at the local level, Rosanna, always. The CDC just provides the data-based guideline. And you're going to see differences of opinion and different implementation in different parts of the country, just the way you pointed out here. The mayor of D.C. decided they were going to pull back on that indoor masking for restaurants. Okay, that was a decision based on what her judgment and that local health officials have decided here in D.C. And I think you're going to see the same thing in other locations, including New York.
Well, you know the people in Brooklyn, your old neighborhood in Dyker Heights. They're very impatient, Dr. Fauci. They don't want to wait anymore.
You know, if I were in Dyker Heights on 13th Avenue and 83rd Street, I'd feel the same way.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, thank you so much for coming back on Good Day New York. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Great to be with you.
All right.